Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of What a Hell of a Way to Die. It's Francis here, and I'm here again once more with Haley Britzky from Task and Purpose. Haley, thank you for coming on. We had you on not too long ago because you do some fantastic reporting where you yell at the Army until the Army does stuff, which as a previous soldier, I was never able to do that. So it's very cool to have somebody who's just like, oh, somebody can actually do that and get some results. So, Haley, how are you doing today?
I'm great. I'm so happy to be back. So thank you for having me.
Yeah. So today, I wanted to talk about a kind of a recurring story that you've been following. And honestly, I don't see a whole lot of other reporters following it. You've been really hammering on it. And it's the water contamination issues in Hawaii. And I feel like it's not really getting a lot of play because it's Hawaii, it's far away, it's not real, not part of the continental United States. And, in a way, and hell, every military base at some point in time has had some kind of messaging about, oh, sorry, we screwed up the water that you guys are all drinking. Like I know Lejeune was having issues with that at some point. I don't think that that's actually been fixed either. They just kind of told people to go pound sand because that's the Marine way of doing things. But this time we have this going on in Hawaii, and like we're actually watching the reaction in real time, which has been fascinating to see because it's so bad. Like it's so bad at times. So can you kind of give us a background on what's going on?
Sure. Yeah. So you summed it up really nicely. So really what we're seeing is the result of a fuel leak from a World War II era fuel storage facility that the Navy runs out of Hawaii. So it's been there for a long, long time, and I've been watching reports coming out from local news in Hawaii that have talked about, leaks that have happened in the last, 10, 20 years. And so this isn't necessarily a new problem, but it is impacting people on such a large scale that it's really grabbing a lot of attention. And I do think part of what you said about, doesn't get a lot of attention because it's happening in Hawaii. It's so far away. I think that I think that's true in a sense. I think that it's hard for media outlets here to really get a grasp of what's happening there. Logistically, the time difference is not the easiest to.
It's not like you can, hop, skip, and jump over to Florida to Hawaii to, do an interview or anything. I don't know what the travel budget for Task and Purpose is like, but I'm sure that somebody would give you a bit of a side eye if you asked for that.
Yes, as much as I would love to. If my editor is listening to this, I am ready to go whenever he wants to send me to Hawaii.
So these fuel. So the first story that we have from you is from December 2nd, and it's titled "The Navy Doesn't Know Why the Water on a Major Base Smells Like Fuel and Has No Idea When It'll Be Fixed." And when you say fuel storage facilities that was built in World War II, I think about, okay, so there's a big tank somewhere and it's leaking. But the picture that accompanies this is like of the Red Hill underground fuel storage facility, and it is a underground. There's pipes, there's wires, there's like it looks like something that's professionally done. It doesn't look like something that is going to leak on a regular basis. So how exactly does this, which I'm looking at, which is a tunnel, for those of you not looking at it, it's like a work tunnel. It's got fluorescent lights. It's got what looks like a rail so that you can run narrow gauge rail through to get back and forth really quick. It's got lots of tubes for fuel. How does this leak into groundwater?
Mm-hmm. So, unfortunately, I don't have as good of an understanding on the mechanics of it as I would like. From what I can understand, the fuel facility also is, I believe it's right above the groundwater, like an aquifer. And so it has leaked into that from what I can understand. So this serves like thousands of people, both on Joint Base Pearl Harbor Hickam, but then also just the communities around it, the civilians that are just served by the Navy's water system. And so it's not just impacting military families, it's impacting residents of Hawaii as well, which makes it, an even bigger deal.
Yeah. So, and what does this fuel facility serve? Is it just military? Like, this is where they keep all the JP-8. This is where they keep the gas to, the diesel to fill up the Humvees on base. What is the use of this fuel facility?
I wish I had a better answer for you.
Okay.
From what I understand, it is just like the fuel that the Navy needs for various, and probably not just the Navy, but the Army as well. We know Joint Base Pearl Harbor Hickam is a joint base, so it serves other services as well. But yeah, from what I've understood, it provides the fuel and jet fuel and things for various vehicles and aircraft and things like that.
All right. So, your second paragraph states in here, residents and military housing on the Joint Navy and Air Force Base, which is home to around 20,000 service members and thousands more dependents, been complaining of a chemical or fuel smell coming from the water. Some of it has an oily sheen. I have seen some of the videos and pictures. It does look pretty gross, everything that's coming out of here. So this, this first article mentions just the people on the military base. Is this also spreading outside to just civilians off of the base who are just normal people who have nothing to do with the military, but now their the water is getting fuel tainted?
Mm-hmm. So I have heard from people that I've spoken to that it is, and I think they're trying to find a better answer as to what extent. Just last week, a team from the CDC went out to Hawaii to survey civilians in the area to kind of get a sense of like what potential health impacts they're facing because of the water. And so I think that's going to give us a much better idea of how extensive this leak has been off the Navy base, and to what size of a community it's been impacting, not just with this leak, but potentially leaks in the past as well.
Mm-hmm. So, as you said, that there have been quote leak problems, but this is the first time that it's really becoming a major issue to the people on base because it is effectively making the water completely unusable at this point.
Yes. Yeah, that's right. I mean, they've transferred people to, or transitioned people into only using, bottled water. They have tanks set up around base for people to come and get water. At the beginning, they were saying, you kind of have to bring your own jugs and we'll give you this much water per family or per person. Which for a lot of people was just really jarring because it's not something you expect to happen. On a military installation, you kind of, I say that, but like you mentioned, that has happened before. But I think most normal people, trusting the water that you're drinking, it's something that you don't really think about, right? Like I go in and brush my teeth. I never worry, oh, this water is going to hurt me or I'm going to have a problem with it. And so I think it's of course a difficult adjustment for people.
Yeah, it is. In the military, Iraq and Afghanistan, it was you can shower in the water, but you really shouldn't brush your teeth with the water. Take a bottle of water, and there's always bottles of water everywhere on those bases because specifically the water was just not the local quote potable water wasn't actually all that potable for the delicate American bodies that we have these days. What we're drinking, all of our nice filtered water, not lapping it out of a stream as we did 150 years ago. Mm-hmm. See, Haley, if we just kind of return to tradition of just drinking directly out of streams, maybe this wouldn't be a problem.
That that is something that should absolutely be brought up to the highest levels. I think. What can we do?
It's just raw water, and you know what? You can charge twice as much for it, basically. This water you can put into your gas tank. It can do one of two things.
Multi-use, absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. But that's we want these storage facilities to be maximizing their potential. So you put it in your body, you put it in your car. It'll screw both of them up, but maybe you'll stop complaining to us. So this just kind of came out of nowhere then, right? Or was there kind of a buildup of like, your initial article is dated December 2nd, which is, a month ago. But there has to have been like a leak doesn't just slowly happen and then all of a sudden this is going on. Have there been complaints before? Like, have there been like the last year or so people have been saying this, or is this really kind of just come on out of nowhere?
So this instance in particular, for me, it did. I mean, we've since, because of this, other outlets have been reporting. The Washington Post did a story talking to several families who have said, they were feeling sick months before this, but they weren't sure why. And so I think that is sort of the problem with a lot of this, is that you're hearing people saying like, well, even back in the summer, my family and I, we were getting sick. We were having a lot of these issues, but they didn't know at the time that could be related to this. So you're kind of just getting sick and not knowing why. But then most recently, we saw that, I believe it was the 20th, the Navy put out a press release, or they put the press release out on the 21st, talking about what happened on the 20th, saying that there was a leak. But they said in the press release, there's no indication that the water is unsafe, like kind of insinuating like everything is fine. We've fixed it. There was a leak, but we've taken care of it. And so that sort of is where it seems like this most recent incident is stemming from, is that leak. And it was about a week later that families started calling in to the housing offices on base with the complaints that their water smelled like fuel or chemicals and had this oily sheen to it. And so that's sort of when this really took off.
Yeah, and so it wasn't so. In essence, the petrochemicals were probably in there, but they just weren't at a level that was detectable by a normal person getting a glass of water. Which is strange to me now that the military. I mean, it's not. I say strange. I mean, in 2020 hindsight vision, like of course you would think that the military would supposedly be testing water aquifers just to make sure that things like that don't happen, so that if it does happen, they can be like, oh, well, before this really starts making people sick, look, we've got a problem here. So I assume there's just no testing going on for the aquifer. They're just, kind of letting it be as it is, and then waiting for somebody to say, oh, actually, I'm throwing up blood because I've been drinking the water here.
Mm-hmm. So there, a local news outlet, the Honolulu Star Advisor, they reported that the Navy had test results dating back to July that said there was petroleum contamination. But the Navy, the way that this works, and why it's so confusing, is that, and one of the reasons why I don't understand the mechanics of it as well as I would like, is the Navy has said, well, those test results are not from the same well that the drinking water is being drawn from. So there shouldn't have been any crossover there. But of course, for the average citizen, they hear there were test results of petroleum contamination, and you're thinking, oh my God, this was going back to July, like this is a problem. This has been happening for months. And the Navy has not done a really good job of explaining what they're saying when they say like that wasn't from the same well, or this was downhill or downstream from this other water aquifer, and so therefore we don't think it's contaminated it. And in a situation like this where people are so nervous and they're so untrusting of what they're seeing, there really has to be an effort to explain this better and talk about the mechanics behind that.
Yeah, definitely. Because as I said, you say fuel tank, and I think, well, there's this one big tank in the ground that's now leaking. An aquifer isn't exactly something that you will just go over there and like dig down 10 feet and test the water that comes out, and we'll call it good from there. It's not it's not easy basically to do these tests, and also you do. I'm not trying to hand it to the Navy here or let them off the hook, but definitely there does need to be a better communication, which the military has never been good at. Never been good at saying, here's what's going on, here's how we're seeing it, and here's what we're planning to do in the future. As a PAO person, my apologies for all of that. I was never able to teach a major or a lieutenant colonel to just tell people what's going on and stop doing this. Like, well, if we don't tell them, like, you should though. You should. Because people are going to get real confused, and then Haley's going to come and write like several articles about how you screwed this all up. You should have been doing reporting 10 years ago when I was dealing with this nonsense. I would have had you on speed dial.
Yeah, no, I mean, the communication part of this is a huge part of the story. Like, I think one of the articles I wrote was talking about the difference and sort of how the Army has communicated and responded to this versus the Navy. Because I kept hearing over and over again from people. And like I said, the story, you could just see for yourself the comments on a lot of these town halls with Navy officials and Army officials. People were responding in, polar opposite ways to the different services. Like to the Army, people were commenting, thank you for updating us. Thank you for being transparent, which are things I have not become very accustomed to seeing as when it comes to people getting information from the military. There's not this like abundance of transparency. But there seemed to be this trust in the Army that, yeah, this is bad, but at least they're telling us, at least they're being upfront about it. Whereas the Navy, people were commenting and the Navy lost people's trust almost immediately. And I don't think that it's gotten it back.
Yeah, one of the biggest things that anybody can learn about, blame is, you don't necessarily have to take the blame, but you can say, look, this is messed up, and here's what we're going to do to help fix this, at least in the interim. Like, because I don't know if this is the Army's fault, if it's the Navy's fault, if it's some contractor that tripped over something and knocked a tube loose somewhere. But at least the Army is the ones who are saying, hey, everything's messed up. Here's where you can go get some fresh water to do what you need until this is fixed. And I feel like, people are a lot more forgiving of the military at times. I think, I don't know. I was never in active duty other than my deployment. So I never lived on a base. So I don't know how much Stockholm syndrome people have on military bases, because you go and you stay in the barracks and you're like, cool, these were built in World War II, and that's black mold and asbestos. That's they're mixing together. I'm sure they're going to create something that's going to create a Lovecraftian horror of some kind in my lungs. So you get kind of used to being hosed by the military, but it's refreshing for the Army to come out and say, things are messed up here.
Yeah. So something that I learned when I was reporting the latest story, talking to an Army officer and kind of about her and her family's experience, she mentioned that the Army early on posted flyers on the door of Army families around the base saying, do not, like it was in all caps and all bold, do not use the water in your home. They made it as clear as possible, like just don't use it. And she mentioned, she's living on a street with Army families, Navy families, Air Force families. Like it's a joint base. There's a lot of other services there. She said no one else got a flyer like that. No one else had that kind of like clear instruction. And so it seemed like the Army just kind of jumped straight into, we don't necessarily have the answers of what's happening, but until we get those, just don't use the water at all. And the Navy sort of took a different approach, it seemed, which was like, we're not really sure what's happening, but so far we don't think there's anything wrong. So you're probably fine. But if you're concerned, don't use it. And that was kind of a difference in response.
Yeah, that's and it is surprising that there's no crossover, or that the Army couldn't just be like, hey, there's a Navy guy down there, maybe we should tell them not to drink the water. It's like, nope, just let the squid suck down the fuel. It's fine.
Yeah, that was also a bit of a I'm not really sure what the thinking was there. I'm not sure if, maybe the Army assumed the Navy would be taking care of its own families. So they were like, well, I have no idea.
And yeah, that because to be fair, to do something like print out all these things, put out messaging like this has to go through a command structure, probably has to be approved by a general somewhere. And the Navy is going to have their own way that they want to handle it. Obviously, their way of handling it is messed up and bad and dumb. But, they would have been even more mad if the Army went around and was just like, hey, yeah, the Navy messed up your stuff. Don't use it. They want to put that information out themselves. And that could have been done, but they didn't, which is, it's not super surprising, but it is it is kind of fantastic that they would let one service do it, but not do it themselves. I assume that they found out that the Army was doing this and decided to just not say anything, to continue to not say anything. And they're continuing to not, right? It's kind of they're kind of doing this, we hear you, we're still investigating, but has the Navy come out and been like, yes, don't use the water, don't touch any of it. There's fuel in it and we're figuring out why.
Yeah, so the Navy did change their tune. I mean, as of right now, from what I can tell, the Navy and the Army are working much closer as sort of what they're doing than they were at the beginning. And we saw that it took a minute for them to just kind of start coordinating. And in my reporting earlier, we found, I got a hold of some internal emails from an Army commander who was just sort of giving, or he's the chief of staff of a command, and he was just giving sort of daily updates to his team, right? It wasn't supposed to be any big thing, just sort of here's what's going on. And he was even saying people are really unhappy with the Navy's response. Like the Navy seems to be saying that the water is okay, but the Army, like our position is that it's absolutely not. And these emails were being sent on like December 7th, December 8th. So like several days into this crisis, there still seemed to be a break in communication there. Since then, it does seem that the two services are sort of working more in tandem. And the Navy came out, like we said at the beginning, they were kind of saying, well, we're testing the water. It seems fine. That was pulled back by the Pearl Harbor Hickam commander on December 6th. Captain Spitzer, he sent out a message where he was just really apologizing like profusely to families and saying, we really thought the testing was meant it was fine. He said, I apologize with my whole heart that we had trusted these initial tests. He kind of realized, I think, that this was not going the way they thought it was. And so they've since, yes, changed their tune, and they're flushing all the neighborhoods. They say they're considering every neighborhood impacted, and they're trying to get it taken care of across the board.
Well, it's good that eventually they'll come around to it. And it is good that people have been reporting this for so long. So what, you said that there have been people that are reporting some of the symptoms. What are the symptoms of that people were dealing with here?
The ones I heard the most were things like headaches, nausea, vomiting, abdominal pain, diarrhea. I mean, things like that. Those were some of the ones that I'd heard the most. Rashes. Some people were saying their children were getting rashes, after they were bathed in the water, things like that. So those seem to be some of the most common. But part of what's so difficult with this is, as I was talking to experts sort of about contamination and the health impacts that can come from that, is there's this concern that like there's going to be these long lasting health effects, like that children especially could be impacted for the rest of their lives because of this. And the problem is that with an issue like this, with water contamination, there isn't a lot of I can't think of the term now, but evidence that parents will be able to say, oh my gosh, in 10 years, my child is having this problem. This is directly tied back to the water contamination. It's just not that easy to find that direct cause to be able to explain it. And so a lot of people are concerned, will we even know if we have health impacts later down the road? How will we know that that's due to water contamination? What if it's due to something else? What if we can't prove that? So there's kind of just this gap in information and knowledge that is really concerning a lot of people, particularly parents.
Yeah, and that's understandable. One of your stories is, the Navy told this military family they were safe from toxic water, then both their children ended up in the ER. Looks like we got like a 4-year-old and maybe a 2-year-old here that's, just drinking the water, and not even drinking the water. Like now you have to worry about, are these petrochemicals like lodged in all of the stuff that you have been, like before you knew not to be drinking it, like anything that has a plastic cup, might have pores that has all of this stuff in it. And it could be like that. That's my biggest concern is as you talk about, flushing all of the systems, like what does that mean for everything else? Like, does flushing the system mean that everything else is going to slowly become untainted? Do we have to get rid of everything else that this stuff has touched? Or has the military even gotten that far yet?
I don't think they've gotten that far, to be honest. I mean, that's the more I talk to people about this, the more there just seems to not be a lot of answers and a lot of like, we know definitively that this will work. I think on some level that, the people who are running these operations are just kind of trying to find the best information out there and hope that it works, or just see what happens. Like as they're doing these flushing operations, they're still testing the water to see, okay, as we do this more and more, are there fewer chemicals coming up on these tests? And, the Army said, I think last week, that they did flushing operations for one neighborhood and tested the water, and it was still tested with petroleum. So they were like essentially being like, okay, we have to do it again. And so that's a lot of the unanswered questions as far as like we have in the story, like linens or plastic, sippy cups for kids or whatever, like, are those going to be impacted? Do they just need to be totally replaced, or would, cleaning with some bleach or something get rid of it? Like that's not really clear. Pipes, people's pipes in their homes, like, yeah, the water may be clear, but are we sure that the pipes aren't contaminated and that water coming through them won't pick up some of that contamination? All of these things kind of seem to not be answered yet. Which again is just fueling that concern and this mistrust. And like, is the Navy doing what it should be? Are we really going to be safe? And again, that goes back to just sort of the loss of public trust that they had at the beginning, and the way that people, for the foreseeable future, may not trust the Navy when they say, no, really the water is fine. We've tested it. It's clean. There's going to be a lot of people out there who are going to say, yeah, well, you've said that before and it wasn't. And so how do we really know that it's clean this time?
Yeah, just start drinking it. And if you start throwing up again, then maybe it's still on us. We'll find out. Now, tell me about this woman that was told to go get a FOIA, because that seemed like that was the one. I've been following this, and I was like, I'll reach out to Haley about this eventually when we get a little bit more, further along, because, as you said, all of this testing that they're doing, they don't know what's going to fix it. And I understand that, like, you have to do the things to see what fixes it. That's what I do for my job, just not with water, but with, computers and stuff. You try to fix it, but, and we've been talking about the terrible messaging that comes out from the Navy, but they at least try to reverse it like quickly. Like back in December, they're like, no, there's problems. We're working on it. We're trying to figure it out. But now we have somebody who like recently was told to go FOIA themselves. And what exactly was the lead up to that?
Yeah, so this is an Army major that I spoke to, and she had been going back and forth with officials at Pearl Harbor Hickam for, a week, if not, more than a week, of trying to get answers about the water. She was seeing, like everyone else, messaging from the Navy at first saying, hey, everything is fine. Then they were told these neighborhoods have been cleared. Their water has been verified as safe. She was in one of those neighborhoods. So she and her husband, of course, were like, oh, okay, our water is fine because the Navy said that it was verified. I still don't know how the Navy verified the water. I've asked. They have not answered that question. But so
put in a FOIA.
Right. Yeah. So it got to a point where her 4-year-old daughter and her 1-year-old son had both been taken to the ER. Her husband had gone to the ER, all with the same symptoms, this vomiting, diarrhea, abdominal pain. And the hospital records all said suspected water contamination exposure. And so when she was told to FOIA, this was sort of when she was explaining it to me, it was sort of the breaking point this day. Her daughter was in the ER. She was trying to find answers. Her own command, who she said, was fantastic, they were trying to help her find answers, and they weren't getting any from Navy officials either. And so she called the chief staff officer of Pearl Harbor Hickam, who she'd spoken to previously, trying to ask for the test results of her daughter's child development center, the daycare she went to every single day, Monday through Friday. And they wouldn't give them to her. They told her to go elsewhere, to talk to somebody else. And she was like, no, you and I've spoken enough. You're at the top of this whole thing. I need you to tell me, like, you are the one who has to have the answers. And as she's on the phone, she hears someone else in the room sort of join the call, and he introduced himself as Colonel Staples, who's the deputy commander of Pearl Harbor Hickam. And she told me that she, asked him, okay, sir, you're the deputy commander. Here's what I need. Here's what I'm asking for. And she said that he told her she needed to submit a Freedom of Information Act request, which, as we know, I know it can take a long, long time for those.
That's not an email you send. There's a whole process behind it, and maybe you'll get the information in a year if you're lucky.
Right. I mean, I have requests I submitted in 2019 that I still have not heard anything back from. It can take years. And so that was just for her. I mean, she explained it as like, she was just hysterical. She was crying. Her daughter was sick. her son had been sick. This is an exhausting process where she just hasn't gotten any answers. And for the deputy commander of this installation to tell her to submit a FOIA was just the last straw, essentially.
And during a pandemic surge too, like, so just worried about ever going into, and neither of those kids can even be vaccinated because they're too young. Like, I cannot imagine how like much this woman nearly fucking strangled that deputy commander through a through the phone, and like, you know, fully would have supported her for doing so. Normally, I do not back up field grades, but in this moment, please, yes, kill that general for telling you to do that. Well, not kill, shake him real hard, until he figures it out.
Right. I mean, I could hear when we were talking. I mean, the kind of stress and anxiety you already have as a parent, like you said, like during COVID, like trying to take care of your kids and then, you know, moving them around as a military family, like you're constantly doing your best to make things as smooth as possible. And for this to happen and to not be able to get answers, I mean, her husband was at the ER with her daughter while she was at home with their other kid, and you know, the doctor is trying to ask, well, how long has she been exposed? And they can't give them an answer. They can't give them a timeline, and which, you know, could impact the kind of treatment or, you know, any number of things. And so as a parent, you know, she was just over it for lack of better terms. And so yeah, that when I heard that, when she told me about that, that was sort of something that stood out to me as like, wow, that's an extremely, she said it, they were just completely, you know, no compassion, no, you know, ability to kind of like soothe her concerns. And it's pretty shocking, which, for sure.
I'm very happy about thing like the parts of Twitter that I see where because soldiers don't want to talk to the press. Like, you know, you right. You write for task and purpose. You were in the military. You're in the Army, right?
No, I wasn't. No, I'm civilian through and through. Yeah.
Okay, so you're a civilian. But me, as I was public affairs, I was a fucking journalist that said U.S. Army, and I carried an M4 with full battle load and everything. And people would look at me untrusting. Like, I am literally just wanting to take a picture of you shooting a Mark 19 and looking cool. And then I'm going to put your cool picture on the internet, and then you can send it to your friends. Why the fuck will you not talk to me, man? Like, get over yourself. So troops don't trust them. Don't trust the press for various reasons. Most of them are completely bullshit, made up reasons. Like every soldier thinks that like a journalist is going to come in and like, you know, make them say something, you know, break operational security or trick them into saying something. And it's like, you don't have to talk to them. Like if you're afraid you're going to say something stupid, then yeah, definitely just don't talk to them. And often I have told people, you guys don't talk to the press. Get your NCO, get your staff sergeant, get somebody that's not you, because you don't know what to say. You can. I'm telling you not to, though. And you know, this also goes along with Davis Winke's reporting that he's been doing down on the border, the Texas National Guard units that have been down on the border, and like how much of just a clusterfuck that's been down there. And again, soldiers don't want to talk to reporters, but if they have no one else to talk to, if you go to the deputy commanding general and say, this is a problem, something is poisoning my children and my family and multiple people, and you're told to go FOIA yourself, you should not be surprised when reporters start to come knocking. And I really like my hope in the next couple of years going forward that, you know, whatever mill Twitter, whatever, you know, it may be, can at least convince some of the up and coming general officers or some of the higher field grade officers that like you can't just like say nothing. You can't just be mean to somebody, because somebody's going to find out, and you're going to get a lot of people who are going to suddenly start screaming at you. Like, it's so easy to cyberbully people now, and I will cyberbully the shit out of a general just for general purposes. But especially for something like this, and you know, all these people are on Twitter. They all have their official, you know, command whatevers, and so when something like this happens, it's very easy for everybody to go and yell at that person. And I do know that some Army general has come out and said that was wrong. But that's an Army general. That's not the admiral. Or was that? Like, I don't know who's in charge of a joint base when it comes to something like this. Like the Navy's there, but is like an admiral in charge? Is the Army in charge? Who's really running that place?
Yeah, so the commander is a Navy captain, the commander of the installation.
Okay.
But there are, I mean, so the general you just mentioned who kind of spoke about this was Major General Ryan, who's the 25th Infantry Division commander. He's out in Hawaii as well, and so he has been leading. He's been doing a lot of the town halls with the Army families. I believe they did do maybe one or two joint town halls where they had Army and Navy officials and some Air Force officials like speaking to people. But he did come out. I think it was the day this was published actually. And Major Feint, the woman that I had been speaking with for this story, brought up the article at the town hall. She went to the town hall and stood up and asked him a question about it and sort of just gave him a debrief of the article. And he responded relatively favorably as far as her speaking to the media, which I was, you don't hear very often from generals. And he was saying, kudos to you for highlighting this. And it sounds like, you have been through the ringer essentially. And so, yeah, I mean, what you're saying about you can't really say things like this and expect no one to find out. That's just sort of, the world we're in now, like the media landscape we're in. Like this is not, 30 years ago where you might be able to say something. And as long as the local reporter doesn't put it in the paper, then no one will really know. I mean, with the internet, with Twitter, with voice recordings, with, live streaming, I mean, all of these things, it's so much easier to find those kinds of things out. And the sooner that leaders learn that and take that to heart, I think the better off things will be.
Yeah, and we'll see. And if the general from the 25th, out over in Schofield Barracks, I don't know. Do you know if Schofield Barracks is also impacted by this?
There are some. I don't know that Schofield Barracks is, but I know there are some of the Army communities. A few of them that have been impacted by it, but just I think a couple, one or two of the neighborhoods.
Yeah, I feel like because Schofield Barracks is like when I think military bases on, and obviously I'm biased because I'm Army, but I think Schofield Barracks. I served with the 25th for a bit. I imagine that like even if it's not his storage facilities and it's not his people directly that are being affected, he's still going to get asked about it. And it did seem that like he did the from what I saw, it's just like, yes, thank you for saying something about this. Thank you for getting somebody moving on this. But also, I can't really give you an answer because, and as we said, nobody really has an answer. Nobody knows why it's happened. Nobody knows what the end fix is here. But at least people are acknowledging. And I think that like really all anybody wants is somebody to acknowledge it. Somebody to say, yes, you're not crazy. Something bad is happening. Here's some fresh water until we figure it out. And like it's not great to have to cook and bathe and do all this stuff with bottled water. It sucks. I've done it before. It's terrible and I hate it. And like I can do it because I'm a soldier. I've dealt with it before. To try to convince my daughter to get into a bathtub that I have to fill up with bottled water or something, or just dump bottled water on her, that's not going to fly very well. And that's understandable too. Like she shouldn't have to put up with something like that. But at least we would have those options. At least, somebody would have said, here's why you can't do that. And here's what you can do going forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that's such an important part of this is like just recognizing what people are dealing with and sort of, a lot of people have felt sort of gaslit through all of this, that like they know their water isn't safe, but they're being told, well, the water tests are coming back fine. And it's kind of like, well, how are you telling me that what I'm seeing isn't correct? So, and we saw that.
So what's wrong with me then comes the next thing. What's wrong with why am I suddenly getting gas out of my sink?
Right. And so we saw that at, the very first town hall that I covered, there was Rear Admiral Cott, who's the commander of Navy Region Hawaii, and he was speaking to families. And, some of the people that were standing up were saying, like, no one is acknowledging that there's something in this water. And like, we keep saying there's an odor or that maybe things like we're testing it. And this man was like, no one is saying yes, we realize something's in your water and we'll find out what it is. And I think that gets to the core of like a lot of people's concerns and anger with this, is how long it took for them to feel like they were being validated in their concerns and what was happening. And which is, again, one of those things. It's like, it's very easy to validate people in that. It's not hard to say, we hear you, we're concerned as well, we are going to get to the bottom of this. Like, it's not that hard to do that. And yet,
It's,
and yet,
you know what, Haley, I work in IT, and I understand sometimes that there are people who are very smart at things who are just not very good at communication. So
Sure.
I am willing to say that, like, that the whoever was in charge of this was a person who's just like, who didn't keep talking, who just, like, somebody says, our water's all fucked up, it smells like fuel, what's going on? And then you have somebody who says, we've done tests and we don't find anything. Now, the next sentence should be, we are still running tests. We understand that you're concerned. We have been getting lots of reports about this. Here is some fresh water that you can get while we hunt this down. But at the moment, our testing is not finding anything, and we're still investigating. Like, that's the proper PAO thing to do. Is you're always supposed to, you're supposed to get in front of it. You're supposed to acknowledge it and say, yes, this is messed up and we're working on it. Because as soon as you cover up anything, it's going to come back to bite you in the ass. And I don't think that, like, I don't know. I don't know if a cover up is trying to happen or not. I don't think that anybody, because if they did, this was like the worst try I've ever seen. Just because it didn't cover anything up. And the Army, it's like nobody went over across the hall and said, "Hey, Army, we're going to cover this up. Can you guys cover it up with us?" And they're like, "Yeah, pinky swear, we won't say anything." You've got one side saying, "Yeah, we tested and everything's fine," and you've got another the other side of the base is going around slapping, placards up all over the place on people's things, like, "Don't touch the water. Go over here to get water. We don't know what's going on, but please don't touch the water." So, it's hard. It's hard to parse it, but and I'm definitely not going to tell anybody that they should trust the Army or the Navy. But it doesn't feel like a cover up. It just feels like normal Navy incompetence.
Yeah, I have no reason at this point with my reporting to think that that's the case. It seems like this was just, an accident, that this happened, and it has been, just sort of mismanaged and miscommunicated. And I think an important point to make is like you said, like, it's people who may know what's going on, but they aren't good at communicating it. And so we saw that with one of the first town halls again. An Army official pointed this out to me, and just kind of illustrated, like, you had a woman standing up saying, I can't bathe my children in this water. And that's like a very emotional response, a very valid response, but it's something that's like, this is hard for me because my children are impacted. And then in response to that, you had Navy officials who were trying to discuss it with her from a logical standpoint. And like, those two things just you can't meet in the middle with that. You can't tell a woman who is saying, like, I'm scared for my child's health, that, well, ma'am, we have found this and this level of at this and this test, and we have no reason, like, that she's not, those are not going to calm her fears at all, or kind of like soothe her concerns. Right. And so I think you had people who were kind of approaching this from a scientific, logical standpoint, but the conversation was way beyond that at that point.
Yeah. And that the military in the past has always kind of worked on that, like, everything's a numbers game, and there's not really humanity behind it. And now, we have video, all of us can see, of this woman, crying and talking about how her kids are sick, or the woman who had to put a dog down because the dog was having problems after drinking the water. And I mean, correlation, causation, I don't know. I don't know if other dogs have been drinking the water and had no problems or whatever, but like, it's one of those things where it's like, there's obviously a problem here. And just, as long as you can, get ahead of it and tell people what's going on to where they're not hurt by it, people aren't going to be happy about it, but they're going to be a lot happier than they are now. So,
right.
So does it feel like, I mean, obviously this is still going on. We're recording this on the 10th of January. So if there's any updates after this day, please consider those while you're listening. But does it feel like, going forward that the Navy and the Army has a better grip on the situation and they're actually like kind of pulled their heads out of their asses?
I think they do have a better grip on this. I think, I know they're consulting outside agencies. The Department of Health of Hawaii is involved with this. I think there's enough attention on this now that it will be taken seriously. I know that does not necessarily translate to a whole lot of confidence for the people who are out there. I think they're going to have to do more work to regain their trust. As the Secretary of the Navy, acknowledged last week and saying, we realized that your trust has been broken in us. And that is going to have to take more effort and more work to really mend that break. But as far as, taking the water seriously and like doing these tests, they are trying to deal with the situation. I think the only thing we can really do at this point is wait to see what happens and sort of watch what they're saying, watch what health experts are saying. Hopefully, the CDC team that's down there will have more answers as far as health impacts and what that looks like. And so I guess, we can all just kind of hope that in the coming weeks and months that we get more answers than not, and that families feel more confident in the water that they're drinking in their home.
Well, fingers crossed. Haley, thank you so much for coming on. We'll have all of the articles linked below. You should be reading all of Haley's reporting at Task and Purpose. You should be reading all the reporting that goes on at Task and Purpose. There's a lot of good stuff that goes on over there. We'll see everything. It's better. It certainly is better than when it was 20 years ago when I joined. So we'll see how things are going in another 20 years. But Haley, as always, thank you for coming on. I really appreciate you and the work that you do.
I so appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
All right, everybody else, take care and thank you for listening.